The morning sun was just beginning to climb over the quiet Silicon Valley hills when Sundar Pichai stepped out of his modest yet elegant home. The gentle warmth on his face felt like a silent blessing for a new day, and he closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply. He always tried to start his mornings slowly, away from the endless noise of boardrooms and conference calls. He believed that the calm of dawn had a kind of magic that no technology could ever replicate. As he looked down the street, he saw the same familiar face as the elderly woman walking her small dog, as the young couple jogging side by side, the old man tending to his roses. This was his sanctuary, a simple neighborhood where he felt human, not a CEO. He checked his watch and started his routine walk to the nearby cafe, a ritual that kept him grounded. He liked to blend in with people who didn't recognize him as the man behind one of the world's biggest tech empires. He walked, quietly, sometimes humming a tune under his breath, but today something felt different, almost like a gentle tug at the corner of his mind. He brushed it off, thinking it was just the stress from a tough week. He had been in meetings about new ethical policies, struggling with decisions that weighed heavily on his conscience. As he reached the cafe, he noticed a man sitting alone. In the far corner, his face hidden behind a newspaper, Sundar paused for a second, feeling an unexpected chill, even though the morning was warm. He ordered his coffee, a simple black with no sugar, and found his usual seat near the window. While sipping slowly, he tried to read some emails, but he felt eyes on him. He looked up and caught a quick glimpse of the man lowering the newspaper slightly, just enough for Sundar to see a pair of sharp eyes studying him intensely. He tried to ignore it and focused back on his phone, but the discomfort grew stronger. He couldn't help but think about his father in India, about the values he had taught him. His father always said, "Never be afraid to look someone in the eye even if they try to hide behind shadows." Sundar took a deep breath and forced himself to look directly at the man again. To his surprise, the man abruptly folded the newspaper and walked out, his steps quick and deliberate. Sundar watched him disappear into the busy street, his heart pounding lightly with a mix of curiosity and unease. He finished his coffee faster than usual and decided to walk back home. He turned the corner and glanced behind him, but the street was empty. Still, the strange encounter weighed on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random moment. As he reached his house and put his key into the lock, he turned again and saw nothing but a few squirrels darting across the lawn. He laughed to himself, feeling a bit foolish for overthinking. He thought, maybe I need more sleep, but inside a subtle alarm had been set off, one he couldn't ignore. That night, he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the cafe moment over and over. He wondered who that man was and what he wanted. He tried to convince himself it was just a coincidence, but something deep in his gut whispered otherwise. His mind drifted back to the man's eyes. There was something intense, something searching in them. They weren't the eyes of a casual observer, they were the eyes of someone with a mission. The next morning, Sundar decided to skip his walk and stayed in to read a book. He told himself he just wanted to rest, but in truth, he didn't want to run into that stranger again. Kept glancing through the curtains, feeling like a child playing hide and seek. His phone rang, jolting him out of his thoughts. It was his old college friend Rajesh, who lived nearby. Rajesh asked if he wanted to join him for lunch at a small restaurant they both loved. He didn't want fear to control him when he stepped out around noon. The bright sun seemed to mock his hidden worries. He walked briskly, hoping to reach the restaurant without any incidents. As he passed a row of parked cars, he felt that same sharp feeling again, like a silent breath against his neck. He stopped suddenly and turned around. For a few seconds, he saw nothing. But then he caught sight of a man's silhouette reflected in a car window. It was quick, almost ghost-like. He spun around fully, his heart hammering now, but the street was empty. He arrived at the restaurant, a bit shaken, managed to put on a smile when he saw Rajesh waving at him from a corner table. They hugged warmly, and for a moment, Sundar felt safe. They spoke about old times, about cricket matches in college, about small dreams they once had before the world turned serious. But deep inside, Sundar felt like a part of him was still on that street, scanning every shadow, questioning every passing face. Halfway through lunch, Rajesh noticed something was wrong. He leaned forward and asked in a soft voice, "Are you okay? You seem distracted." Sundar hesitated, unsure if he should share what he was feeling. He didn't want to sound paranoid. But looking into Rajesh's eyes, he saw the same honest warmth that had carried them through their toughest days. So he told him about the man at the cafe and the strange moments afterward. Rajesh listened carefully, nodding slowly. When Sundar finished, Rajesh put his hand on his and said, "Maybe you should talk to security. This doesn't sound like something you can just brush off." Sundar nodded, but deep inside, he felt a strange resistance. He had always been someone who believed in facing problems directly, not hiding behind guards or walls. He finished his meal with Rajesh and promised to be careful. They walked out together, and Sundar looked around cautiously. Nothing unusual this time. They hugged again before parting ways. When he got home that evening, he finally called his head of security. The man, a former Navy officer named Tomas, was professional and calm. Sundar explained everything, every glance, every strange step. Tomas listened without interruption and then simply said, "We will handle this. But please don't change your routine too much. The more predictable you are, the easier it is to protect you." Sundar agreed but felt even more uneasy hearing those words. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing faint sounds outside his window, though every time he checked, there was nothing. Around midnight, he sat by his window, staring into the dark garden below. He wondered what the stranger wanted. Was it revenge? Was it a fanatic? Or was it someone from his past? Someone he had unknowingly hurt? These thoughts played like a broken record in his mind, making him feel helpless. In a way he hadn't felt since childhood. By morning, his eyes were red and heavy, but he forced himself to get up. He decided to go to the office early, thought that maybe work would distract him. As he drove, he kept checking his rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man following him. But there was nothing unusual on the road. When he arrived at Google's main building, he took a deep breath and tried to shake off the fear. He put on his badge and entered, greeting a few employees along the way. But even among familiar faces, he felt watched, as if an invisible thread connected him to that stranger. He walked into his office and closed the door softly behind him. For a few seconds, he just stood there, breathing deeply, trying to find some kind of center within himself. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop, forcing himself to focus on an upcoming presentation. He tried to drown his thoughts in numbers and graphs, but every few minutes, his mind wandered back to that man. To those eyes, an hour later, Tomas called. He said he had checked all the surveillance footage from the cafe and nearby streets. There was indeed a man who seemed to follow Sundar, but his face was always turned away from cameras. It was like he knew exactly where to stand to avoid being fully seen. Tomas said they would continue investigating but asked Sundar to remain. Careful, he hung up and felt a cold wave wash over him. He looked out the window and saw people laughing in the courtyard, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside his mind. Wanted to join them to feel normal again, but he knew he couldn't. Not yet. Around noon, he received an anonymous email. Subject line read, "You can't hide forever." His hands trembled as he opened it. It was no message, just a blurry photo of him sitting at the cafe 2 days ago. He stared at the screen, feeling his heartbeat echo in his ears. The fear that had been quietly lurking suddenly felt like a wildfire burning through his veins. He knew then that this wasn't just some curious stranger. This was someone who had a plan, someone who was close enough to watch. To capture his private moments, he called Tomas immediately and forwarded the email. Tomas's voice remained calm but firm. He said they would increase surveillance and put more people on watch around Sundar's home and office. Sundar thanked him, but felt a growing dread. He sat there in his office, staring at the photo, wondering who would do this and why. His mind flipped through every face he had ever met, every deal, every handshake, every forgotten argument. He felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure if the ground beneath him would hold. That evening, he decided to leave the office earlier than usual. As he walked to his car, he glanced around, his eyes darting to every shadow. Started the engine quickly and drove out of the parking lot. At every red light, he checked his mirrors. Halfway home, he felt a sudden urge to turn onto a side street just to see if anyone would follow. He made a sharp turn and pulled over. A few moments, the road behind him remained empty. He waited, holding his breath. Then, a dark sedan slowly appeared in the distance, its headlights off. Sundar's breath caught in his throat, quickly pulled back onto the road and drove away, his mind screaming with fear and questions. When he finally reached home, he parked inside and locked every door and window. He went straight to his study and sat in the dark, listening to the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. He felt like he was in a dream, one that was turning into a nightmare. He thought of his family, his children, his wife. He worried about their safety, about the life they had built so carefully. He knew he had to find answers, but he also knew he couldn't do it alone. He took out a notebook from his drawer and started writing down every detail he could remember about the man, the way he held the newspaper, the shape of his hands, the sharpness in his eyes. He thought that maybe, just maybe, these details would help later. As he wrote, he felt a strange mix of fear and determination growing inside him. He didn't know who this person was or what he wanted, but he knew he had to face it. He couldn't run, not now, not ever. And as the night deepened and the house fell silent, Sundar sat in his study, the pages of his notebook filling up with frantic handwriting. He felt a storm gathering around him, a storm he could no longer ignore. And in the quiet darkness, he made a silent promise to himself and to his family. He would find out the truth, no matter how shocking, no matter how dangerous, but little. Did he know the truth waiting for him was far beyond anything he could have imagined, and the identity of the stranger was about to shake the very foundation of his world? Sundar woke up before dawn. His eyes felt heavy, as if he had not slept at all. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. The house was quiet, too quiet. He could hear his own breathing, each breath sounding louder than usual. He looked at the notebook he had left open on the study table the night before. The pages were covered in quick, restless handwriting. He felt a strange sense of urgency. As he picked it up again, he walked to the window and pulled the curtain slightly. The street was dark, except for the streetlights casting orange circles on the ground. He scanned every corner, expecting to see a figure lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing, just the cold morning air. He closed the curtain quickly and pressed his forehead against the glass. His mind kept replaying the image of that dark sedan following him. The car felt like a phantom that refused to leave him alone. He went to the kitchen to make some tea, hoping the warmth would calm his nerves. His hands trembled as he poured the hot water. He sat at the table, trying to collect his thoughts. He wondered who would go to such lengths to follow him. Was it a competitor? Was it someone from his past? Or maybe someone who disagreed with his decisions as CEO? The questions felt endless, echoing loudly in his head. As he took slow sips, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Tomas. "We have added extra security around your home and office. Please let us know if you notice anything new today." Sundar felt a small wave of relief, but it was quickly washed away by the heavy weight in his chest. He replied with a short thank you and set the phone down. He glanced at the family photos on the wall. One picture showed him holding his daughter. At a beach years ago, she had a big smile, her hair flying in the wind. He remembered that day vividly. He had promised himself to protect her from all harm. Now, looking at that smile, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. He knew he had to keep her and the rest of his family safe, no matter what. He decided he couldn't hide forever. He needed to go out, face the day, and act normal. He got dressed carefully, choosing a simple blue shirt and dark jeans. He looked in the mirror and tried to smile, but it came out weak and strained. He took a deep breath, grabbed his bag, and stepped outside. As he locked the door behind him, he felt a shiver run down his spine. He turned around quickly, scanning the bushes and the sidewalk. Nothing moved. He forced himself to keep walking, his steps slow but steady. He tried to focus on the small details, the smell of wet grass, the soft chirping of early birds. But no matter how hard he tried, couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When he reached his car, he checked the back seat before getting in. It felt like a scene from a movie, but this was his life now. He started the engine and drove toward the office, taking a different route than usual. He thought maybe he could confuse whoever was following him. Every turn felt like a gamble. He checked the mirrors constantly, but no dark sedan appeared. A tiny hope started to bloom inside him. He finally arrived at the office and parked in a private underground garage, got out quickly, looking around. The security guard on duty greeted him politely. Sundar nodded but didn't stop. He rushed to the elevator, pressing the button repeatedly as if it would make the doors close. Faster. When he got to his floor, he walked straight to his office and shut the door behind him. He stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the building. He finally sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. Dozens of emails waited for him, but he couldn't focus. He felt like each message was from another world, a world he no longer belonged to. He closed the laptop and rested his head on the table. Minutes passed like slow-moving clouds. Then there was a soft knock at the door. Sundar jumped up, his heart beating wildly. "Come in," he said, trying to sound calm. Tomas entered, his face serious but gentle. "We checked more footage," Tomas began. "We found the sedan parked near your house yesterday. The license plates are fake. Is this not a random person? They know what they're doing?" Sundar swallowed hard, his throat dry. "What do they want?" he asked quietly. "We don't know yet," Tomas replied. "But we're increasing security around your family as well. Please consider working from home for a few days." Shook his head. "I can't hide. I need to keep moving. They're trying to scare me, and I can't let them win." Tomas sighed deeply. "I understand. But at least let us assign a personal guard to you around the clock." After a long pause, Sundar nodded. "Okay, thank you." Tomas left, and Sundar sat back down. He felt torn between fear and determination. He opened his notebook again and started writing. Each word felt like a small act of courage. He wrote about his thoughts, his fears, the strange man's eyes, the dark sedan. Writing felt like shining a small light into a dark cave. Around noon, he decided to step out for lunch. He thought maybe being around people would help clear his mind. He took the elevator down and stepped out into the bright sunlight. He saw his new guard, a tall man named David, standing a few steps behind him. David nodded, his eyes scanning. The area Sundar walked to a nearby restaurant and chose a table outside. He ordered a simple meal and tried to enjoy the moment. People walked by, some laughing, some lost in their phones. Sundar watched them carefully, searching for any familiar face, any unusual movement. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw someone standing across the street. It was a man wearing a dark hoodie, his face partly hidden. Sundar felt his stomach tighten. The man didn't move, just stood there, staring directly at him. Sundar's fork froze halfway to his mouth. David noticed immediately and stepped closer. "Sir, do you want to leave?" David asked quietly. Sundar hesitated, his eyes locked on the man. After a few seconds, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into a narrow alley. Sundar dropped his fork and stood up abruptly. "Let's go," he said to David. They walked quickly back to the office. Sundar felt his legs tremble slightly, but he kept going. Inside the building, he rushed to his office and closed the blinds. He sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. He felt his heart beating so hard that he thought it might burst. He pulled out his phone and checked his messages. There was a new one from an unknown number. "You look tired today." He felt a wave of cold run through him. He threw the phone onto the floor and covered his face with his hands. It felt like the walls were closing in, the air getting thinner. After a few minutes, he stood up slowly and picked up the phone. He called Tomas and read the message to him. Tomas promised to trace the number and increase monitoring. Sundar felt a small comfort in Tomas's calm voice, but deep down, he knew that whoever this was, they were getting closer. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Sundar tried to work, but his mind kept drifting. Every noise in the hallway made him jump. Every shadow on the wall felt like it was moving. He thought of his family again and wondered if they were safe. He wanted to call them, but he didn't want to worry them even more. As the sun began to set, he finally decided to go home. David stayed close, his eyes always moving. Felt longer than ever. Sundar kept expecting to see the dark sedan appear in his mirror. But they made it home without incident. Inside the house, Sundar felt like a prisoner. He locked all the doors and checked every window. He sat down at the kitchen table, staring at his cold tea from the morning. His mind replayed the day's events in slow motion. He felt drained, as if every bit of strength had been sucked out of him. He stood up and went to his study. He opened the notebook again and started writing. He wrote about the man in the hoodie, the message on his phone, the feeling of being watched every second. He wrote until his hand ached, the pen moving almost on its own. When he finally stopped, he felt a small flicker of relief, like a faint candle in a storm. He looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. He knew he needed to rest, but he couldn't bring himself to go to bed. He felt that if he closed his eyes, the stranger would come closer. So he stayed up, sitting in the chair by the window, staring into the darkness outside. The moonlight fell softly on the garden. The bushes looked like strange shapes in the dark. He thought he saw something move, but when he looked closer, it was just the wind. He sighed deeply and leaned back. His thoughts drifted to his father again, to the old advice about facing fear. He wondered what his father would say now. It's probably something simple like be brave. But bravery felt so far away tonight. Then his phone buzzed again. His hand shook as he picked it up. Another message. Tomorrow you will finally understand. Sundar's eyes widened. He read the message again and again. What did it mean? What was going to happen tomorrow? He felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an endless darkness. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment. He knew that whatever was coming, he had to face it. He opened his notebook one last time that night and wrote only one sentence, I am ready. And as he put down the pen, the silence in the house felt even deeper. Sundar sat there, holding his phone, staring at the last message. The clock ticked slowly, each second echoing like a distant drum. Tomorrow was coming, and with it, answers that would change everything. Sundar barely moved from his chair. The entire night, the message kept flashing in his mind like a warning light. Tomorrow, you will finally understand.
Ice.
The words weren't loud, they weren't violent, but they carried a quiet weight, the kind that stays inside your bones. He didn't sleep. He sighed even as the night sky turned to a dull blue. And the birds began to sing softly. Sundar remained still. Every sound outside made him glance toward the window. Every car passing by, every rustle in the garden. The world outside looked normal, but something inside him had shifted. He finally stood, stretched his stiff body, and walked slowly to the sink to splash water on his face as the cold water touched his skin. He stared into the mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, not from crying, but from exhaustion, from fear, from holding it all together when every instinct screamed to fall apart. But today was the day, whatever it was. After drying his face, he checked his phone again. No new messages. Nothing from the stranger. Nothing from Tomas either. He sent a quick text to confirm the guards were still positioned outside. He didn't want to take chances. He changed into a fresh shirt and dark trousers. No tie. He didn't feel like pretending to be formal today. He walked downstairs and looked around the house. Everything was still. His wife and kids had gone. Out of town for a few days as a precaution. He missed them deeply, but at least they were safe. As he stepped out the front door, David was already waiting by the car. The man nodded, expression unreadable. Sundar nodded back and got into the vehicle without saying a word. They drove in silence, halfway to the office. Sundar leaned forward. Take the long route today, he said softly. David didn't question. They turned down quieter streets, winding through neighborhoods where people were just starting their day. Sundar's eyes scanned the sidewalks, rooftops, alleys. Nothing stood out, But the silence wasn't comforting. It was tense. Like a calm before the storm. As they reached the office, Sundar glanced at the building. Tall, sleek, modern, glass and metal. It looked strong from the outside. But inside, he knew how fragile things really were. He stepped out and walked in quickly. As he passed through security, he noticed Tomas standing near the entrance, speaking to one of the guards. When he saw Sundar, he walked over. "We've added another layer of surveillance," Tomas said quietly. "Facial recognition scans, vehicle trackers, and background checks on anyone who enters the campus." "Any updates?" Sundar asked. Tomas shook his head. The messages were sent from a burner phone, untraceable. No fingerprints on the keyboard either. We're dealing with someone who's thought this through," Tomas added. "I know," Sundar whispered. He went up to his office. Every step felt heavier than the last. When he reached his floor, it was unusually quiet. Too quiet. He walked down the hallway and saw that many of his staff hadn't arrived yet. Maybe they were working from home. Maybe they felt the same strange tension in the air. He entered his office and closed the door behind him. He stood there in silence, waiting, but for what? He didn't know. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and tried to read emails. But every few seconds, his eyes drifted to the window. Something was coming. He could feel it. And then, phone rang, a landline, rarely used. He stared at it, ringing slow, steady. He reached for the receiver, but hesitated. He didn't recognize the number. Finally, he picked it up. "Hello, there." Was silence then. A calm voice. "Mail. Low. Check your inbox." Before Sundar could say anything, the call disconnected. His hands were shaking as he opened his email. Nothing in the inbox. He refreshed it. One new message. No subject. No sender. Name just a single attachment. Video file. He paused. Every fiber in him said, "Don't open it." But he did. The screen went black for a moment, then flickered. The video was grainy, taken from a distance. The angle looked familiar. Too familiar. Then he realized what he was looking at. It was him, sitting with Rajesh at lunch a few days ago. The camera slowly zoomed in on his face. His laughter, his smile, and then something worse. The camera turned slightly, and the man filming appeared in a reflection on the restaurant's glass window. He was wearing the ode at the same. Stranger. The video ended with a single word flashing on the screen. Remember. Sundar sat frozen. What was he supposed to remember? He leaned back, heart pounding. Was this about the past? Was this someone he had met before? He tried to think. Years of meetings, partnerships, press events, speeches. It's all blurred. The phone rang again. This time it was his personal cell. Another. "Unknown number," he answered with a trembling voice. "Who are you?" A long pause, then the voice again. "Someone you forgot." "Why are you doing this?" Sundar asked. "Because you walked away," the voice replied. "You closed the door and never looked back." "What do you want?" "I want you to see." "What? Everything?" Then silence. The call ended. Sundar stood up abruptly, paced around the room, his mind racing. Who had he forgotten? Who had he left behind? He reached for the notebook again, flipping through the pages. Notes. Sketches. Moments. He grabbed a pen and wrote down the words from the call. Someone you forgot, someone you left behind. He stared at the words. He thought back to his early days. In the U.S. college dorms, long nights, part-time jobs, endless emails. Was it someone from that time, or was it earlier? He remembered the people he had met when Google was still a dream. Young engineers, volunteers, idealists. Then his mind landed on one name. A chill ran through him. No, whispered it. Deep inside, something clicked. A face. Quiet. Always. Sitting at the edge of meetings, never saying much. Loyal. Forgotten. A young coder. His name was Aman. They had worked together on a small side project before Google became massive. Aman was soft-spoken, brilliant in his own way. Sundar had mentored him for a while. But when the company grew, Eamon didn't keep up. His skills weren't fast enough. The pressure grew. Then one day, Eamon disappeared. No one looked for him. No one asked, not even Sundar. And now, all these years later, he wondered, was it him? Picked up the phone and called Tomas. I think I know who it might be, he said quickly. Who? His name is Aman. Full name Aman Mathur. He worked with me a long time ago. We lost touch. Tomas immediately began searching. As Sundar waited, his heart thudded loudly in his chest. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, Tomas called back. We found someone matching that name. He changed his last name. Lives about 2 hours from here. And sir, he hasn't had a stable job in years. Suffered some mental health challenges, isolated, but there's more. Sundar swallowed hard. What? He's been posting online under an anonymous name. It's posts about betrayal, about being forgotten, screenshots of you. Timelines. This isn't random. Sundar sat down, stunned. Guilt rushed in like a flood. How could he not remember? Sooner? How could he not even check? He stared at the screen in front of him. Someone you forgot. The words echoed now with unbearable. Wait, Tomas was still speaking. We're working on locating him precisely, but you need to stay inside. Let us handle it. But Sundar wasn't listening. His thoughts were far away now, back in a college dorm. Back in those late nights where Eamon sat silently, offering ideas that Sundar took credit for, not out of malice, but out of speed. Was rising fast, and Aman couldn't keep up. He had left him behind. And now, Aman had come back. But what did he want? Revenge? Forgiveness? A conversation? Sundar didn't know. But he was certain of one thing. The past wasn't finished with him, yet. And tomorrow had arrived. Sundar sat frozen in his office chair. The realization about Eamon felt like a sharp blade, cutting through the fog in his mind. He could hear Tomas still speaking on the phone. The words faded into a distant echo. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and buried his face in his hands. The guilt felt like a heavy stone pressing against his chest. He remembered Eamon's soft voice during those late-night coding sessions. Eamon never craved the spotlight. He wanted to build, to help, to belong. Sundar had seen that hunger in his eyes. But as the company grew, things changed. Deadlines got tighter, investors pushed harder, and Sundar focused on moving forward fast. He had told himself that he had no time to carry everyone with him. He had convinced himself it was the only way. But now, in this quiet office, he realized that one forgotten soul had never stopped following him. Not in the literal sense, but in the shadows of his choices. He stood up abruptly, pacing around the room. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might break his ribs. He felt a sudden urge to do something, anything. He opened his laptop and typed Eamon's name again. More posts appeared. Rambling messages, photos, sketches. A mix of admiration and pain. Eamon had documented almost everything. Sundar felt his hands tremble on the keyboard. Tomas called again. We have his location, Tomas said quickly. Small cabin outside of Santa Cruz. We're preparing a team to approach safely. Sundar closed his eyes. A cabin, alone. It all made sense now. Aman had chosen isolation, feeding his mind with memories and old wounds. Wait, Sundar said sharply. Don't send the team yet, sir. Please. Let me try first, Sundar insisted. He wants to talk to me. It's me he wants. There. With silence on the line, this is risky, Tomas finally said. But I can't stop you. Just take a guard with you. Sundar agreed, but in his heart, he knew he needed to face Aman alone. Not as a CEO, not as a powerful figure, but as a man who had left someone behind. He grabbed his jacket and rushed out. David the guard followed closely. Sundar turned to him. I need to do this alone, he said firmly. David hesitated. Sir, please, just stay close. But let me walk in first, Sundar said, his voice low but determined, after a tense pause. David nodded. They got into the car, and Sundar gave the driver the address. The journey felt endless. Every mile felt like a step deeper, into his own past. He stared out the window, watching the trees blur by. The sun was beginning to sink, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was beautiful, almost cruelly so, given the storm inside him, as they got closer. The roads narrowed, and the city noise faded. Soon they reached a dirt path lined with tall trees. The car stopped, and Sundar stepped out. The cabin stood at the end of the path, partly hidden by overgrown bushes and old pine trees. It looked lonely, like a forgotten memory. Sundar took a deep breath. His legs felt heavy, but he pushed forward. Every step sounded louder in the quiet evening. He could feel David's presence somewhere behind him, watching carefully. He reached the door and hesitated. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and knocked. There was no immediate answer. He knocked again, softer this time. A faint sound came from inside, a shuffle, a hesitant movement then. The door creaked open just a few inches. A face appeared. Older. Then he remembered. Thinner. Eyes sunken, but burning with an intense light. Amen. Their eyes met. A long, heavy silence fell between them. Amen, Sundar whispered. Amen didn't speak. He just stared, his fingers gripping the edge of the door tightly. His breathing was shallow, uneven. I'm sorry, Sundar said. The words felt small, almost childish. Eamon's lips twitched slightly, but it wasn't quite a smile. Like a painful stretch. You remember me, Eamon finally said, his voice hoarse. Sundar nodded. Yes, I should have remembered sooner. I should have come back for you. Mon let out a sound that was part laugh, part sob, opened the door wider, stepping back. Come in, he said. Sundar stepped inside cautiously. The cabin smelled of old books and stale air. Papers were scattered everywhere, drawings, printouts of old emails, photos of Sundar from events and interviews. It looked like a shrine mixed with a detective's evidence wall. Sundar felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Aman sat on a worn-out chair, gesturing for Sundar to sit on the other. They faced each other, close, but worlds apart. I watched you. Aman began slowly. I watched you grow, become the man everyone loves. They called you brilliant, humble, kind. And I just sat here. Sundar swallowed hard. I didn't know you were watching. Eamon's eyes darkened. Didn't know because you didn't care. You left. You moved so fast, and you forgot the people who helped you build those first blocks. I thought you moved on, Sundar said quietly. I thought you found your own path. Aman let out a bitter laugh. My own path? I lost everything. My job, my mind, my purpose. Do you know what it's like to sit in silence and realize you were invisible to the one person you trusted? Sundar lowered his gaze. I failed you, he admitted. I was young and selfish. I thought success was about moving forward, no matter who got left behind. Eamon's hand shook slightly as he spoke. I sent you messages. You. But your walls got higher. You didn't even see me standing there. Tears welled up in Sundar's eyes. He felt the full weight of Eamon's pain crashing over him. He had been so blind, so focused on his own ascent, that he never looked back. I'm here now, Sundar whispered. I don't expect forgiveness. But I needed to come, to tell you that you mattered. You still matter. Eamon looked at him, breathing heavily. For a moment, his eyes softened. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, as if searching for some hidden answer. Why? Now? Eamon asked finally. Because you reached out, Sundar said. Because I finally heard you. Eamon closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. The room grew silent again. A breeze passed through a crack in the window, rustling the papers on the floor, after what felt like hours. Eamon spoke again, his voice barely audible. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted you to see me, to remember I was there. Sundar nodded, his own tears falling freely now. I see you, I remember. Mon opened his eyes slowly and looked at Sundar, as if seeing him truly for the first time. "I don't know if that's enough," Eamon whispered, "but it's a start." They sat in that quiet, broken space, two men bound by a past neither of them had fully understood until now. Outside, the last light of day faded completely, leaving them surrounded by the soft darkness of the forest. Sundar didn't know what would come next. He didn't know if Eamon would ever truly forgive him, or if this fragile moment would break apart tomorrow. But right then, he chose to stay, to listen, to be present. And for the first time in years, Eamon let his guard down. They talked through the night, sharing stories, memories, regrets. Two friends, lost and found again in the most unexpected way. When dawn finally broke, the first rays of sunlight crept into the small cabin. A new day had begun. But deep inside, Sundar knew the journey with Eamon had only just started. The soft morning light slipped into the cabin, touching every dusty corner and painting gentle lines across Eamon's tired face. Sundar watched him in silence. It was the first time Eamon had truly looked peaceful since Sundar arrived. His shoulders were lower, his eyes softer, as if the weight of years had finally started to slide off. They had talked for hours, emptying memories like old boxes stored too long in a dark attic. Sundar felt both lighter and heavier at once. He took a slow breath, the cool morning air mixing with the smell of old books and pine trees drifting in through the cracked window. Eamon stirred, blinking at the light. "You didn't sleep," Eamon said, his voice raspy but gentle. "Neither did you," Sundar replied with a faint, broken smile. Eamon looked down at his hands, tracing the lines on his palms as if they held all the answers he had ever looked for. "I don't know what happens now," Amon said softly. Sundar leaned forward. "We take one step at a time, together, if you'll let me." Eamon looked up sharply, surprise flickering in his eyes. For a moment, it seemed like he wanted to push Sundar away again, but then his expression softened, and he just nodded slowly. A sudden knock on the cabin door made them both jump. Sundar turned, his heart pounding. David stepped in cautiously, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Eamon. He looked ready to protect Sundar at any cost. "Everything okay?" David asked. Sundar stood and nodded. "We're okay." David hesitated, clearly uncertain, then stepped back outside. Closing the door gently behind him, Eamon let out a shaky breath, his hands rubbing together nervously. "All these years, I imagined this moment," Eamon said. "I thought I would scream at you, maybe hurt you. But now, all I feel is tired." Sundar felt tears burning his eyes again. "I don't expect you to forgive me today," Sundar said quietly. "Maybe. Never. But I want to help you move forward. You don't have to be alone anymore." Eamon stared at him, as if trying to decide if this was real. Sundar looked around the cabin, taking in the scattered papers and crumpled photos on the floor. "You're brilliant," Sundar continued. "You always were. I see that now more clearly than ever." Amon gave a small, bitter laugh. "Brilliant? I'm a ghost. I've spent so long hiding in shadows, feeding on old wounds. I don't even know who I am anymore." "Then let's find out together," Sundar said, his voice firm but kind. Eamon looked at Sundar for a long time, his eyes searching. Finally, he gave the smallest nod. They sat there in silence again, but this time it felt different. Lighter, as if the air itself had shifted. A bird chirped outside, and Eamon turned toward the window. For a second, he looked like a child seeing something new and beautiful for the first time. "I don't know where to start," Mon admitted. "Maybe with breakfast," Sundar suggested gently, trying to bring a small smile to Eamon's face. Eamon let out a surprised laugh, soft and hesitant but real. It was the first real laugh Sundar had heard from him since they reunited. They stood and moved to the small kitchen area. Sundar looked through the cabinets, finding a half-empty box of cereal and some old tea bags. They worked together silently. Eamon pouring water into a kettle, Sundar rummaging for clean cups. When they finally sat at the small wooden table, they shared a simple breakfast. It wasn't much. It felt like a feast compared to the heavy emptiness that had hung over them all night. Between bites, Eamon looked up. "Double quotes, do you really think there's a place for me out there?" he asked, his voice small. "Yes," Sundar said without hesitation, "and not just any place. It's a meaningful one." Aman lowered his eyes. "I don't know if I can handle the world anymore. I've been invisible for so long." "Then we start small," Sundar replied. "Maybe not the whole world right away. Maybe just one room, one project, one moment at a time." Eamon swallowed hard, blinking away tears. "And you'll be there?" Eamon asked. "I will," Sundar said, reaching across the table to place his hand gently over Eamon's. Eamon nodded again, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. Outside, the morning grew brighter. The forest seemed to hum softly as if it too was breathing a sigh of relief. But just as a fragile peace began to settle, Sundar's phone buzzed sharply against the table. He picked it up, frowning at the unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Hello," a cold voice replied. "We know where you are?" Sundar felt the blood drain from his face. "Who is this?" he demanded. "You thought it was just Aman," the voice continued, low and mocking. "But you forgot there are others. Many others." Sundar's fingers tightened around the phone. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice shaking. The voice laughed softly. "You want the truth, and now the world will see it." Before Sundar could say another word, the call ended. He sat there, stunned. The phone still pressed to his ear. Eamon watched him, confusion and fear spreading across his face. "Who was that?" Sundar lowered the phone slowly. I don't know. But it sounds like Eamon isn't the only one." Eamon's face went pale, started to shake his head slowly, as if trying to deny the reality crashing down around them. "This isn't me," Eamon said urgently. "I wanted to confront you, but I didn't. I didn't plan anything beyond that. I swear." Sundar reached over, grabbing Eamon's hand tightly. "I believe you." But deep inside, a new fear began to grow. Somehow, while he focused on Eamon, someone else had been watching, planning, waiting, and now they had revealed themselves. He looked at Eamon, who looked so small and fragile at that moment, and he felt a sudden protective urge surge through him. "We need to leave," Sundar said, quickly standing up. "We're not safe here." Aman stood too, his hands trembling. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere safe," Sundar replied, already moving to the door. Outside, David looked up sharply as they emerged. "Sir?" David called, stepping forward. "We have to go," Sundar said urgently. Now, David scanned the woods around them, his hand instinctively moving to the small earpiece in his ear. Understood, they moved quickly to the car. Aman hesitated, looking back at the cabin, his face twisted with pain, as if he were leaving behind the last piece of himself. Sundar placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll come back for what matters, but right now, we have to go." Aman nodded weakly. As they drove away, Sundar kept his eyes on the rearview mirror, half expecting to see shadows moving among the trees, but the road behind them stayed empty, inside. The car. Eamon stared out the window, silent tears sliding down his cheeks. Sundar watched him, feeling a sharp ache deep in his chest. He had come to find one ghost from his past and discovered a hidden web of others, waiting in the dark. And as they sped down the winding roads, Sundar realized the confrontation with Aman was only the beginning. A larger truth was coming, and it would change everything. The car raced down the narrow forest road, the early morning light flickering through the trees like restless ghosts. Sundar kept glancing at Eamon, who sat curled against the door, staring at nothing. His eyes were wide and glassy, his fingers gripping the edge of his seat. David drove with laser focus, his jaw tight. Every turn felt sharp. Every bump in the road felt like a new threat waiting to explode. Sundar's phone buzzed again. He hesitated before picking it up. An unknown number once more. He pressed the answer button with trembling fingers. "Hello." Deep, almost amused voice spoke. "Running away will not change the past, Sundar." Anar felt a shiver crawl up his spine. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice cracking. The voice chuckled softly. "You remember Aman? But there were others, weren't there? The young engineers you pushed out? Dreamers you left behind while you climbed higher? We were all watching, waiting for the day you would finally listen. Sundar's throat went dry. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The voice continued, calm and sharp like a knife. We followed you for years. We saw every speech, every smile. It became a symbol of kindness to the world. But to us, you were the man who stepped over the fallen. Aman flinched at those words, shrinking deeper into his seat. Sundar swallowed hard. What do you want? He whispered. The voice paused for a moment, then answered. The truth. I want the world to see the real you, and today they will. The call ended abruptly, leaving a ringing silence in the car. Sundar stared at his phone screen, his hand shaking. Who was it? Aman asked, his voice small, broken. Sundar looked at him, struggling to find words. Someone from the past, not just you. But others, I didn't even realize I hurt. Aman's face twisted in pain. I thought it was just me, he whispered. I didn't know. I didn't know there were more. Neither did I, Sundar said, his voice hollow. David's eyes flickered to the mirror. Sir, we need to get somewhere secure. They might already be moving against you publicly. As if on cue, Sundar's phone began buzzing again. This time it wasn't a call, but dozens of notifications flooding in all at once. Messages, emails, news alerts. He opened one, his face drained of color. Videos, private moments, meetings, old conversations taken out of context. Angry employees leaving. Unedited footage of confrontations that had been buried for years. Everything pieced together like a poisonous puzzle. They're leaking everything, Sundar muttered, his voice faint. Aman leaned over, reading the screen. His eyes widened in horror. My God. Sundar felt the car close in around him. Like a coffin, his breath came shallow and quick. He had spent years building a public image of humility and grace. Now, in mere minutes, it was unraveling in front of the entire world. David kept driving. Faster now, trying to put as much distance as possible between them and the threat. But the real threat wasn't on the road. It was everywhere, on every word. Screen in every mind that had once admired Sundar. Sundar leaned forward, burying his face in his hands. Tears slipped through his fingers. I failed them, he whispered. All of them. Aman touched Sundar's shoulder lightly. You failed. Me too, he said softly. But you came for me. You listened. Maybe that means something. Sundar looked up slowly, eyes red and lost. I don't know if it's enough anymore. Aman nodded, his face sad but calm. Maybe not. Yeah, but you can't hide from the truth. Forever. Maybe. This is your chance to stand in front of it instead of running. Sundar sat back, his mind spinning. For years, he had told himself he was helping the world, pushing innovation forward. He convinced himself that sacrifices were necessary. He saw all the cracks, wary eyes. He saw all the cracks he had ignored. They arrived at a small safe house, a quiet hidden building surrounded by trees. David stopped the car and jumped out, scanning the area before opening the door for Sundar and Aman. Inside, the space was simple. Just a table, a few chairs, a single large window overlooking the forest. Sundar sank into a chair, staring blankly at the floor. His phone kept buzzing on the table beside him. He didn't pick it up. Aman stood nearby, pacing slowly, his eyes filled with unspoken questions. Finally, Sundar took a deep breath and spoke. I need to address them. All of them. David turned sharply. Sir, it's dangerous. They might twist your words. I know, Sundar said, his voice low but steady. But if I don't face this now, I never will. Aman watched him carefully. You're going to tell them everything? Sundar nodded. The truth, my failures, my mistakes, everything. David sighed deeply but didn't argue. He knew there was no stopping him now. Sundar stood, picking up his phone. He started a live video stream. For a moment, his hands shook so badly, he almost dropped the device. But he steadied himself. The screen lit up with viewers almost instantly. Tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. The world was watching Sundar. Looked directly into the camera, he took a long, shaky breath. "Today, you saw a side of me that I hid," he began, his voice soft but echoing in the silent room. "I tried to be a symbol of kindness and progress. But in my journey, I hurt people. I left people behind. I stepped on dreams to build my own." Mon watched, eyes wide, as Sundar continued. "I didn't do it because I wanted to hurt anyone," Sundar said. "But that doesn't change the fact that I did. And for that, I am deeply, truly sorry." His voice broke. He paused, closing his eyes for a moment. "I met someone today, someone I failed a long time ago. He showed me that even if we think we've moved on, the people we forget carry those wounds forever. I can't change the past, but I can face it." Tears streamed down his cheeks now. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect sympathy. I only hope that by facing my mistakes, I can begin to rebuild the trust I destroyed." He ended the video abruptly and set the phone down. The room felt impossibly still. Eamon stood frozen, staring at Sundar as if seeing him for the first time. David lowered his head, his face tight with emotion. Sundar wiped his face, taking long, trembling breaths. Eamon stepped forward slowly and collapsed into a chair across from Sundar. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," Aman whispered. Sundar looked at him, his eyes exhausted but clear. "I had to." Between them, heavy but different, not filled with anger or betrayal this time, but with a fragile sense of shared humanity. Finally, Eamon reached out, his fingers brushing Sundar's hand lightly. "Maybe we can start over. Not forget, but start something new." Sundar nodded, gripping Eamon's hand tightly. Outside the window, the morning sun rose higher, casting golden light across the trees. Birds began to sing softly, as if sensing a shift in the air. Sundar didn't know what would come next. Maybe he would lose everything. Maybe the world would turn its back on him. But in that small room with Aman by his side and the raw truth finally spoken soon, I felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. And for the first time in a long time, believed that even broken stories could find a new beginning.